Today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Emeritus Professor Ron McCallum, who was this year named as Senior Australian of the Year. Ron will be speaking to us about law, leadership and living with a disability. Ron, you've certainly become a leader and a role model for both people within the legal profession and people with disabilities. So how do you define leadership and what do you see as the key to effective leadership?
I think effective keys to leadership are never to ask anyone to do anything that you have not done or are not prepared to do yourself. Always remain humble and be engaged in deep listening with other people. It sounds hackneyed, but the relevant time for you and I at the moment is now.
Yes.
We could think about the past. I have many regrets after a long life, but there's nothing I can do about them and the future is speculation. What's important now is you and I interacting and listening to one another and observing one another. And I think that we don't do enough deep listening and enough deep understanding. In some ways I think email can be a barrier to communication. And so I think you need to really understand your team if you're a leader. You need to be prepared to lead from the front. And you need to have an element of integrity in what you're doing. I'm not sure that I live up to all of that, but I think that's the key to leadership.
I know that you've said previously that one of your aims in life is to change attitudes of everyday Australians to be more thoughtful about and accepting of the disabled. Do you feel that you're achieving that or have in some way achieved that?
I hope I've achieved it with the thousands of law students whom I've taught over almost 40 years. I hope I've achieved it through meeting people throughout my life. I hope I've achieved it by the example I've tried to show of my own life and of my other sisters and brothers with disabilities. I want people to meet my fellow persons with disabilities. You know, Claire, disabilities can and do happen in all families. Often they're unexpected. They're the result of an accident. Sadly, on occasions, they're a result of a birth. 1 in 12 births has a disability issue. And it's very confronting. You give birth to a child with a disability, it's extraordinarily confronting. Places huge pressures often upon the marriage and on any siblings of the child. Disabilities occur when we get old. Our hearing and our eyes start wearing out. We're all going to be subject or know people with disabilities throughout our lives. I want us to get more familiar with one another and learn that we're all ordinary in the sense that we all have the same hopes, loves and desires. We're no different. And the whole idea of the Disabilities Convention is to say that we persons with disabilities want the same human rights and inherent dignity that most Australians, with the exception of Indigenous Australians, frankly take for granted. That's really, to put it at its simplest.
In regards to the legal profession, do you feel that it's receptive to and supportive of lawyers with disabilities? And what could it be doing better?
I'm very honoured that the firm in which we're sitting, HWL Ebsworth, has taken me on as a consultant. And prior to that, in the 90s, the firm that's called now Blake Dawson took me on as a special counsel for 3 days a week. There aren't a huge number of we lawyers with disabilities, and one of the things that we have to realise is that the world doesn't owe any of us a living, you or me. And if we want a job, we've actually got to show the employer that we have something to offer. I think we lawyers with disabilities work very, very hard indeed. I would hope that we could have more mentoring, that law firms would have mentoring schemes just as we have for young women lawyers, that law firms would see having lawyers with disabilities as part of their diversity programs. I think this is developing, but the numbers of us as lawyers are really quite small.
And Ron, you're also known as being a straight shooter and a bit of a larrikin. So what would you say is your secret to maintaining a positive outlook?
Oh dear me, I think because I've always been loved throughout my life. I think love has an enormous power, that I'm very happy in life and that fortune has smiled upon me. I came from a very poor background and never expected to be doing all of this. In many ways, perhaps without my disability, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have gone to law school. I have a brother who's a truck driver. So one of his friends said to me, well, Ron, if you can't drive a truck, you may as well go to university. So yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it's given me great opportunities. And because I lost my sight as a prem birth, I don't really have anything to experience of loss. Intellectually, I understand what is the loss. And people say to me, you know, you haven't seen your wife's face, you haven't seen your children's face, and I understand the importance of that. But I don't feel that in a sense of a loss because I've never seen a face, really. It's hard to articulate. So I think that's a reason to be positive. I think if I were poor, if I didn't have satisfactory work, if I wasn't married, if I didn't have children, I would feel more of a sense of loss. And many of my sisters and brothers with disabilities have disabilities that vary. Many aren't very healthy, they're not well. My disability occurred hours after my birth, and it's constant. It happened, but I'm not unwell. You know, I think it sounds trite that we all should bless the relationships we're in, and we all should bless that we are able to do interesting work, and we all should bless that we're not hungry. They sound small things, but they're the, you know, if we think about what is most of our lives about, it's doing work, eating, having relationships, etc., etc.
And Ron, you were recently bestowed the great honour of being named 2011 Senior Australian of the Year. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, I found it sort of difficult to get a handle on initially because I think of myself as such a young thing. But when I checked the rules, it's for people over the age of 60 who are still working. Well, there are very many of us working over 60. It was established in 1999, or just after the, or just during the year of older persons for the United Nations. So I hope that I'm an example of what those of us who are over 60 can do. I think it's a bit of a mistake for us to keep thinking about the years we've been on the planet as marking our ages. We really need to think of our outlook and have a young outlook. To put it in a humorous way, I think life can be made up of various segments. There's the nappy segment. I regard myself as in the wisdom segment of the life spectrum. And I think that, you know, when you're in your 7th decade, you've seen a bit of life, and hopefully I'm not as foolish as what I was at 25, but time will tell. You know.
Finally, Ron, where to from here? What's next on your list of achievements?
Well, I am on the committee, the treaty body, until December 2014. So that will keep me fairly busy up till that stage. I'll be 66 by then. I'm still writing. I'm still working in a law firm. I'm still teaching a course at the university, and I want to keep teaching a course a year. I'll always be interested in what's new and in what's innovative. As our children have grown up, I find it very interesting watching their young lives. I'd like to spend a bit more time at home, being reflective. I want to get back to playing the flute. I want to spend more time meditating. I want to spend more time thinking about trees and nature and our world that my children and when they have children, perhaps my grandchildren will have to inherit. I think in some ways these days can be the best days of my life. I'm looking forward to them.
Ron, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
That's a pleasure.